Hi, I'm artist. You're an artist. Now that we are able to pick colors that are kinda close to a reference, now what? Do you want to make them look more fun, more whimsical? Here's how. So there are a few things we can use to achieve this goal, and in this video we will go from the simpler ones to the more complicated techniques. And I will use this painting past me was working on over here as the main demonstration. Also, as always, this one is available as the wallpaper for July for the monthly wallpaper club on Ko-fi and YouTube membership. Anyway, let's start with the most simple technique, picking colors with more saturation. But let's take a quick look at some color terminology first. We have three here: hue, saturation, and value. So value is simply how light or dark a color is, which we did talk about in the last video, by the way. And saturation is like how pure a color is. For example, on this square color picker, a color more on the right hand side will be more saturated than the one on the left. And finally, hue is like the purest form of each color, and they are on the circle that goes around the square over here. Okay, so picking more saturated color, right? Easy. Just pick a color that's more on the right side of the square and done, right? Well, the tricky things about this is the value of the color will change by you doing that. Like, it could get much darker by you moving the cursor towards the right. And as you might know from the last video, picking the wrong, well, let's say the unintended value, like the one you don't intend to pick, can affect your painting quite seriously in the way that you don't want to. So the goal is picking a more saturated color that has the same values as the original one you want to pick. So how can we do that? Well, a good rule of thumb is going to the right and then up just a little. The color will generally stay somewhat in the same range of value that way. Generally, because there will be some differences depending on hue, but most of the time just go a little bit to the right and a little bit to the up will be enough to pick a more saturated color with the same edge value as the one you wanted to pick originally. So that is the mechanism behind the technique. Let's do a quick conclusion of how to do it. So pick colors just like how you normally would do it, but instead of the colors you thought were quote-unquote right, as in similar to the reference, nudge your cursor towards the upper right hand corner of the square. And remember, just a little bit, not too much. And now you are successfully pick a color that has the same edge value, but is a lot more vibrant. And let's take a look at how this will look in practice. So for the purple part of the ice cream over here, I thought the color would be in this range, like something like this. So I chose one that is a little bit to the right and up, and it looked like this. But if you actually use the eye drop on the reference itself, you can see that the colors I picked was actually a lot lighter than the actual color in the reference. And this is a really good time to remind you that we don't really need to pick the exact same color, the exact same value as a reference. As long as you maintain a good separation between the light and the dark values within the boundary of your painting, things will look okay. It will look right. And as for a tip to how to keep your value clean, again, you can revisit my last video on value study to learn more about that. The next method is diversifying the hue. So usually when we go from the light to the shadow on an object, the colors will not only change in value, but also change in hue as well. For example, I think you might have already heard about the light being warm and the shadow being cool. Like, you should pick warm colors for the light and cool colors for the shadow. Well, this is not always true, like it depends on the color of the light source and also the color of the surrounding environment and stuff. You can have warm light paired with warm shadow, cool light with warm shadow, etc. And you can watch this video to have a better understanding of this phenomenon, and I will leave the link down below in the description box, by the way. But anyway, TLDR, there is a logic behind how colors change hues going from the light to the shadow. If your light source is cool, then the lighter it gets, the cooler the color is. If your light source is warm, then the color will get both brighter and warmer, etc. So to understand this a little bit better, let's take a look at this pomegranate. You can see that it is overall a pretty neutral red, but going near the highlight, the hue goes towards the orange, i.e. being a lot warmer. And here in the shadow, it goes just a tiny bit towards the magenta, i.e. being a little cooler. Like not that much, because the surrounding environment, like the cloth and the leaf, is pretty neutral in terms of color, I think. But you can still see the logic behind the change in hue over here, and once you understand that logic, that is where you can push things a lot further and make your painting look a lot more fun. What I chose to do here in the study was pushing the color of the light super duper far towards the warm direction, i.e. towards the orange. I even used straight up yellow as the highlight, as you can see, and I also pushed the shadow a little bit further on the cooler side as well, i.e. towards the magenta, but not too much, because I still wanted the attention to be fully on the super warm, almost like golden highlight over here. Anyway, coming back to today's main painting, you can see that I applied the same technique for the blue part of the dish over here. The part that was in the light was some kind of turquoise color, which was a lot nearer to green, i.e. being warmer, while the shadow part was more towards this, well, Russian blue-esque blue? Anyway, what I meant was it was a lot cooler. Yeah. So in conclusion, for this method, you need to understand the logic behind how colors change hue going from the light to the shadow. Stick to it and then stretch that logic a lot further than how it is in the actual reference. It will make your color look a lot more unexpected, therefore fun and maybe whimsical, if you push it far enough, I think. And finally, something I would like to call color wheel roulette. This is where I eyedrop a color, usually is the highlight part, and then going to the color wheel, spin it, and then put whatever color I get down on the chosen part. This IQs will be the prime example of how the color wheel roulette will look for something like the highlight. So why I usually do it around the highlight part? Well, it's because that's the range where all the different hues will have pretty similar value to each other, so that's the reason why it will look really colorful without looking too out of place. So basically that is what I do to spice things up when I feel like the colors are not fun enough. But now, after practicing this for a long time, I have developed this technique a lot further than how it originally was, and I discovered two more potential places you could use this technique on. The first one is where there is a sudden change from light to shadow, and then the second one is where there's a lot of gray. Let's go over them one by one. So the first one, sudden change between the light and the shadow. Some examples of these kinds of places would be this part on the ice cream scoop, or these stripes of sunlight on the table and the dish. So why is this kind of place a good candidate for the color wheel roulette? Well, it's because that's where a certain thing in real life actually takes place, which is subsurface scattering, or you might know it as the fun thing that makes your skin look super duper red under certain lighting, like it is the most prominent when you hold your hands against the light. But basically, it makes the edge between the light and the shadow turns really saturated, and that's where you can put some highly saturated colors, which normally may look a little unnatural, but here in this context, it can look both really fun and magical, and still somewhat grounded in reality. This orange over here is a pretty good example for that. And inspired by this phenomenon, I think playing some color wheel roulette over here is a pretty good idea. Like, you know, there's already a lot of weird color there. Let's pile even more weird colors on top, because why not? And that's what I did on this edge here of the ice cream scoop. I only sprinkled some speck of weird colors on there. Not too much, not too noticeable, but it did make things a lot more whimsical, in my opinion. And I also did the same thing to the sunlight stripes on the table, like not only on this painting, but also on a lot more other paintings as well. Here's a few examples. Next, the second place, which is wherever there has a lot of gray. So why gray? It's because gray is a magical zone where a lot of different hues can blend into each other so seamlessly and beautifully. The technical reason behind that is all the grays are the less saturated version of hues, so they look harmonious when placed beside each other, unlike their more saturated counterpart, which can make your eye feel pretty tired or sometimes even kinda painful when seeing them all together like that. And you can watch this video to learn more about all the gray. So we do have a magical gray zone like that in the shadow of the ice cream scoop over here. How can we apply the color wheel roulette on that part? Well, pretty much the same thing as always. Use the eyedropper on the gray part, spin the wheel, and then lightly flick that color on that same gray. Why lightly? Well, first, this is assuming that you also use an opacity pressure sensitivity brush to render like me. And second, being light-handed will ensure that you will only alter the hue of the gray and not the value. At least, not too much. Remember, value is always the most important thing that you have to keep consistent. You can play around with a lot of things, but please keep your values clean. And so, the result will look something like this. And from far away, it looks pretty normal. But when you zoom in, that's where you start to see all the whimsy and the magic unfold. Anyway, that's pretty much all the techniques I usually use to achieve this kind of coloring. And of course, this painting style of mine, even though not the most realistic, but still pretty heavy on the realism side of things. I hope you can experiment and play around with all the things I introduced here today, like stretching them out really far, pushing it even further and further away from reality to create something even more magical and whimsical than this. There are a lot of room for growth here, you know. Anyway, I think the ice cream is done. Let's check out how it looks, shall we? So that's all I have for color picking, at least at this point of my journey. Hopefully you find them helpful. And for now, thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget about the July wallpapers. As always, hope you have a good day/night ahead and see you later.